Chapter 3. The Great Divorce. By the 1500s, Charles V's son, Philip II, had inherited an empire that literally spanned the globe. Spain, the Netherlands, half of Italy, most of Central Europe, and vast territories in the Americas all bow to his authority. But as anyone who has ever tried to manage a large organization can tell you, controlling a global empire is expensive. Philip was constantly fighting wars. He was battling the French on his western border. He was fighting the Ottoman Empire in the Mediterranean. He was suppressing rebellions in his Italian territories. And most expensive of all, he was trying to stamp out the Protestant Reformation that was spreading across Northern Europe. Where do you get money for all these wars? Well, if you're Philip II, you look at your most prosperous territories and start raising taxes. And the most prosperous territories in his entire empire were the Low Countries. Here's where the story gets complicated. Because Philip wasn't just squeezing the Low Countries economically, he was also trying to transform them religiously. The northern provinces, especially, had become increasingly Protestant. They read their Bibles in their own languages. They preferred simple church services to elaborate Catholic ceremonies. They believed individuals could communicate directly with God without going through priests. Philip II was having none of this. He was a devout Catholic who saw Protestantism as a threat to both his spiritual authority and his political control. In 1566, he sent the Duke of Alba North with 10,000 Spanish troops and orders to crush the Protestant movement completely. Alba established what he called the Council of Troubles, though everyone else called it the Council of Blood. He executed thousands of people, including prominent nobles who had dared to question Spanish policy. He imposed new taxes that were even heavier than before. He made it clear that the Low Countries would be Catholic and Spanish, or they would be nothing at all. This was the moment when resistance turned into revolution. The rebellion began in earnest in 1568, led by a man named William of Orange. William was known as William the Silent, though he was anything but quiet when it came to opposing Spanish rule. He became the father of Dutch independence, and his descendants still rule the Netherlands today. But William faced an enormous problem. Spain was the superpower of the 16th century. Spanish armies had conquered the Aztec Empire and the Inca Empire. Spanish fleets controlled the sea routes to the Americas. Spanish gold and silver financed the most powerful military machine in Europe. How could a collection of small provinces possibly stand up to such overwhelming force? The answer lies in one of the eternal principles of European politics. The great power simply could not bear to see their rivals succeed. France, despite being Catholic like Spain, secretly supported the Protestant Dutch rebels. Why? Because they hated seeing Spanish power grow even stronger. England, despite having its own complicated relationship with Protestantism, provided covert aid to the Dutch cause. Why? Because Spanish control of the Low Countries would threaten English trade and English security. With French cold and English naval support, the Dutch rebellion gradually gained momentum. The war dragged on for decades. In fact, it lasted so long that historians call it the 80 Years' War. But here's the crucial detail that shaped everything that followed. When the Dutch finally achieved independence with the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, only the northern 7 provinces broke free. The southern 10 provinces, modern-day Belgium and Luxembourg, remained under Spanish control. Why did the south stay with Spain? The reasons were both practical and cultural. The southern provinces were more Catholic and had less reason to rebel on religious grounds. They were also wealthier at the time and had more to lose from a destructive war. Some southern nobles even formed an alliance called the Union of Arras in 1579, explicitly siding with Spain against the northern rebels. The economic differences mattered too. The southern provinces had built their wealth on an older, guild-based textile and manufacturing economy that operated within traditional frameworks. They wanted stability and protection from foreign competition. The northern provinces, by contrast, were rapidly shifting toward a newer, outward-looking maritime and trading economy. They wanted global markets and religious freedom. These fundamental differences made the split almost inevitable. The south wanted protection and stability. The north wanted trade and liberty. Spain could provide the first, but not the second. And so, for the first time in centuries, the Low Countries were permanently divided. The Dutch Republic emerged as an independent nation and quickly became the world's premier trading power. Amsterdam replaced Antwerp as the commercial heart of Northern Europe. Dutch explorers and merchants spread across the globe, establishing colonies and trading posts from New Amsterdam to New Jakarta. Meanwhile, the southern provinces remained under Spanish rule, and later Austrian rule, for another century and a half. The split that began in 1568 would echo through the centuries, creating cultural and political divisions that persist to this day. Chapter 4. Napoleon's brief experiment. Let me fast forward through nearly 2 centuries of history, past the golden age of the Dutch Republic, past the wars of Louis XIV, past the rise and fall of various European dynasties, to arrive at one of the most dramatic periods in European history. The 1790s brought revolution to France. Not just any revolution, but a complete upheaval that sent shockwaves across the entire continent. Kings and nobles fled for their lives, ancient institutions crumbled overnight, and from this chaos emerged one of history's most brilliant military commanders, Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon's armies swept across Europe like a wildfire. And yes, the Low Countries fell under French control. For the first time since the Burgundian period, Amsterdam and Brussels found themselves part of the same political unit. The old divisions between North and South seemed to disappear under French revolutionary rule. Napoleon ruled the Low Countries for nearly 20 years. During this period, he tried to modernize their governments, standardize their legal systems, and integrate them fully into his continental empire. For a brief moment, it looked like the region might remain permanently united under French leadership. But as we all know, Napoleon's empire didn't last. His disastrous invasion of Russia in 1812 marked the beginning of the end. By 1814, a coalition of European powers had defeated him and sent him into exile. This created a fascinating problem for the victorious Allies. They gathered in Vienna in 1815 to redraw the map of Europe. Their primary goal was simple: make sure that no single nation could ever dominate the continent the way Napoleon had. The solution they devised for the Low Countries was elegant in its apparent simplicity. They would unite all the former Spanish and Austrian territories in the region with the Dutch Republic, creating a single, strong buffer state on France's northern border. This new nation would be called the United Kingdom of the Netherlands, and it would be ruled by the Dutch King William I. On paper, it made perfect sense. Hadn't these territories shared similar histories for centuries? Weren't they all small, prosperous trading regions with similar interests? Wouldn't they be stronger together than apart? The experiment lasted exactly 15 years. The problems became apparent almost immediately after unification. Let me walk you through what went wrong, because it's a perfect case study in how cultural and economic differences can destroy even the most logical political arrangements. Religion remained a major dividing line. The northern provinces had been Protestant for 2.5 centuries. Their churches were simple buildings with plain wooden pews and clear glass windows. Sunday services were conducted in Dutch, with minimal ceremony and maximum emphasis on reading scripture. The southern provinces had remained Catholic throughout the Spanish and Austrian periods. Their churches were ornate buildings filled with statues and stained glass windows. Mass was conducted in Latin, with elaborate ceremonies led by trained priests. These weren't just different worship styles. They represented fundamentally different ways of understanding the relationship between individuals and God. The language barrier created constant practical problems. Government sessions required translators. Legal proceedings became complicated when witnesses and judges spoke different languages. Even simple administrative tasks became burdensome when official documents had to be produced in both Dutch and French. But the economic differences ran even deeper. Northern merchants had built their wealth on free trade. They bought goods cheaply in one port, transported them efficiently to another, and sold them at a profit. They wanted minimal tariffs, simple regulations, and open access to foreign markets. Southern manufacturers had developed a completely different economic model. Their wealth came from producing goods, textiles, metalwork, and other manufactured items that required protection from foreign competition. What the North saw as healthy free trade, the South saw as economic suicide. King William I tried his best to bridge these differences. He really did. But every policy decision seemed to benefit one region at the expense of the other. When he promoted free trade policies, northern merchants cheered while southern manufacturers went bankrupt. When he supported Protestant education, northern families were pleased while southern Catholic parents felt their children were being indoctrinated. Perhaps most problematically, William allowed the North to dominate the new kingdom's parliament, despite the fact that the southern provinces actually had a larger population. Northern politicians were making decisions about Catholic education. Dutch-speaking officials were governing French-speaking provinces. It was a recipe for resentment. The final straw was financial. The northern provinces had spent the previous 2 centuries building a global empire. Fighting was from the Caribbean to Indonesia. All those military adventures had left them with enormous debts. When the kingdoms united, guess who got stuck helping to pay those debts? The southern provinces, who had never seen a penny of profit from Dutch colonial ventures. By 1830, frustration in the southern provinces had reached a boiling point.
If this video helped even a little, hit that like button to fuel the channel and drop your questions in the comments. They might shape the next video.